the future of health care. Republican leaders work to get support for their bill to replace Obamacare. Helping our vets. President Trump fulfills a campaign promise by signing a bill for veterans. We'll tell you what's in it. Pakistan blast. Nearly a dozen people are dead after a powerful car bomb. And a future American saint? New details on the case of Capuchin friar Father Solanus Casey on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 23, 2017.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The White House is backing the GOP health care plan as Republican leaders in the Senate focus on finding the votes to pass it. White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway, a longtime pro-life advocate, says critics aren't providing the whole picture.
I just don't want everybody scaring people to think that they're going to lose their benefits and their coverage without giving a full accounting of everything that this includes. It includes very generous expansions of health savings accounts.
Democrats hope to scare off as many Republican votes as possible by planning efforts around the country to criticize the measure. They say the GOP plan would mean fewer people with coverage and higher costs for many. Already 4 Republican senators say they're not ready to support the bill as it's written, but they're open to negotiating. Now Senator Dean Heller of Nevada says he opposes the bill too, but for different reasons. Let's go now to Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi with more. Jason?
Wyatt, the 4 original senators are Ted Cruz of Texas, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Mike Lee of Utah, and Rand Paul of Kentucky. They say the proposal is an improvement on Obamacare, but it doesn't do enough to lower health care costs, a major flaw they see in the current law. I asked Senator Paul what his concerns are.
Senator Paul, what's it going to take to get you to yes on this health care bill?
Well, you know, so far I've looked at the bill, and I'm for repealing Obamacare, but it doesn't look like it repeals it. It looks like it keeps Obamacare. The subsidies in the bill are virtually identical to Obamacare. We haven't really lessened the subsidies. In fact, our early estimate is there may be more subsidies in this bill than there are in Obamacare. We're also concerned that the spending in this bill in the first year or two may actually exceed Obamacare spending. That just doesn't sound like repeal to us. I'm concerned also that the death spiral of Obamacare with the rising prices and premiums in the individual market, they don't fix it, they just subsidize it. They dump a bunch of taxpayer money into the insurance companies and say, please lower your rates. The problem is that we don't have any money up here. We're $500 billion in the hole this year. So I think we really can't afford to add new entitlement programs. And it's just not a very conservative notion to think that the federal government would be giving money to an industry, the health insurance industry. They make $15 billion a year. Why in the world would the taxpayer be asked to give insurance companies money?
What's the odds that this is going to pass?
I think the odds that we have negotiation are good. There are 4 of us right now, and we're hoping to negotiate together. And if the 4 of us work as a team, I think we can make the bill better. Can we make it good enough to actually support? We'll see how the negotiations go.
The Planned Parenthood defunding, I know 2 Republicans want to see that stripped out. What do you say?
Planned Parenthood, if you gave them no money, you would notice no difference in the country other than you might have less abortions, which would be a good thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't think the government should pay for abortions. Everything Planned Parenthood does is done by community health centers. The bill actually gives more money it gives the money you would have essentially given to Planned Parenthood, gives it to community health centers, and community health centers don't engage in anything that's politically, divisive or divisive. So I think it'd be better to do most of our health care screening and things through community health centers and not through Planned Parenthood.
Thank you, Senator Paul. Thank you.
Several pro-life leaders met with Secretary Price today at the White House. The president of the Susan B. Anthony list spent some time there at the White House, and she says the draft does include pro-life priorities. Those priorities are to defund Planned Parenthood and also to ban those tax credits from going to plans that fund abortion. But she says she's very worried that those pro-life priorities could be stripped out for political or parliamentary reasons. Wyatt?
Jason, I know the U.S. bishops came out with a statement on the health care bill. Where do they stand?
They also praised the pro-life language in the Senate bill, but they say they're worried that cuts to Medicaid will really hurt the poor, and they're urging the senators to make sure they protect that population.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi for us in the Senate tonight. Thanks, Jason. President Trump is making good on a campaign promise, signing a bill to improve veterans' affairs by holding VA employees accountable and making it easier to fire them if necessary.
It gives the Secretary the authority to remove federal employees who fail and endanger our veterans, and to do so quickly and effectively. Those entrusted with the sacred duty of serving our veterans will be held accountable for the care they provide.
The bill also protects whistleblowers from being punished for reporting misconduct. It was prompted by a 2014 scandal at the Phoenix VA Medical Center where some veterans died while waiting for care. Joining us now is Mark Lucas, Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. While in the Army, Mark served along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border as a platoon leader. Mark, you were in the East Room for today's signing. Does this law address the problems that surfaced at the VA in 2014?
Today was really a culmination of years of effort by hundreds of thousands of veterans all across the country to bring accountability to the VA. And since our inception, Concerned Veterans for America has made our #1 priority bringing accountability. This bill is exactly what we need to bring the reformation needed since that waitlist scandal, like you mentioned, in Phoenix, Arizona.
Well, as you say, your group advocates for policies that protect veterans. Can you give us an idea of some of the issues that veterans deal with after serving our country?
Sure. Concerned Veterans for America, we are a grassroots organization that operates in over 35 states. So we take our message directly to the people. We make phone calls and knock on doors, encouraging people to contact their legislator and let them know that veterans, we continue to face issues when we return home from combat. Unfortunately, 3 miles away from the White House, the Inspector General for the VA says that veterans face imminent danger just by seeking treatment. So we see problems every single day. This bill is a step in the right direction.
Do you think with this new administration, this new law, is the VA turning over a new leaf, and do you think is going, generally speaking, in the right direction?
Absolutely. President Trump, along the campaign trail, made promises to fix the VA. He unveiled a 10-point plan to reform the VA. And with him appointing Dr. Shulkin as VA Secretary, who is a tenacious leader on behalf of veterans, we see the VA heading in the right direction. However, we got to ensure that people understand that this is just the first step. We need accountability first before we start looking at offering more choice and greater reformations to the VA.
Mark, I know that you yourself are Catholic. How does your faith drive you to serve fellow veterans?
You know, my Catholic faith has taught me about servant leadership. And it reminds me that I have to put others first. Whether it was my time in Afghanistan serving my soldiers along the mountains of the Pakistani border or here at home, we as veterans, we believe that we have to put mission first. And my Catholic faith drives everything I do in my life, and it makes me a better person and a much stronger leader on behalf of our veteran population.
Very powerful message. Mark Lucas, Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Former President George W. Bush returns to Washington to voice his support for veterans.
A lot of times you hear people gripe about the VA, and I'm sure there's some flaws in the system. But it's important for our citizens and our vets to know the vast majority of people who work for the Veterans Administration care deeply about helping our vets transition.
President Bush called VA Secretary David Shulkin a strong leader and says the country is lucky to have him. The Bush Institute's Stand Up initiative helps veterans with education and employment opportunities. Vice President Mike Pence travels to Colorado to mark the 40th anniversary of Focus on the Family, an evangelical Christian ministry that is pro-life and pro-traditional marriage.
The 40th anniversary of a cornerstone of American life for so many Americans, an organization that's been a champion without equal for American families, a bastion of grace that's inspired millions by your model of Christian love.
The group has been a prominent conservative voice for more than 3 decades. Leaders say they are focused more on personal outreach these days and not political activism. Representative Steve Scalise continues to improve in the hospital after being shot at a congressional baseball practice. It's the most prominent attack against lawmakers this year, but not the only one. The Washington Free Beacon says 30 GOP congressmen have been attacked or threatened since May. "11 people are dead after a powerful car bomb exploded outside a police station in southwestern Pakistan. 20 others were injured. No one claims responsibility for the attack, but the country is blaming its neighbor, India. We're now learning the cause of the massive apartment fire in London, which killed nearly 80 people. London police say a faulty refrigerator caused the fire, which spread through the 24-story public housing project on June 14th. The department also says cladding inside the building failed safety tests. Police are now considering filing manslaughter charges related to the fire. Investigators are looking at every company involved in building and repairing the tower. North Korea is calling itself the biggest victim in the death of Otto Warmbier. North Korea denies it tortured the American college student and accuses the U.S. and South Korea of a smear campaign. Warmbier returned to the U.S. last week in a coma. He passed away days later. The 22-year-old was laid to rest in Ohio yesterday. According to Italian media reports, the Vatican's Secretary of State is expected to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin and the heads of the Russian Orthodox Church in August. The visit comes after a historic meeting in Cuba between Pope Francis and Patriarch Kirill in 2016. It was the first encounter between a Roman Catholic Pope and a Russian Orthodox Patriarch in nearly 1,000 years since the Orthodox split with Rome. Eduard Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us with more. Edward, what do we know exactly about the trip?
Well, it's not been confirmed yet, White, but Cardinal Parolin said on Wednesday that in all probability he will be going to Moscow in August for a high-level meeting with President Putin and the Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill. But as he says, it's not fully confirmed yet, but he's pretty sure it's going to happen.
What about the timing here, Edward? Why now?
Well, it's really to build on that historic encounter last year with Patriarch Kirill and Pope Francis. They want to build on that, but also they want to, of course, improve relations with the Orthodox, which some say has never been better, and also to build bridges with the Russian government over its positions in Ukraine, for example, and its campaign or bombing campaign in Syria. There's a great concern, I think, among some in the Vatican to build bridges and to really bring peace to these areas.
Well, when you talk about building bridges and bringing them together, what are the obstacles to better relations between the Russian Orthodox and the Catholic Church?
Well, the main sticking point, White, is the Ukrainian Catholic Church. There's a long and painful history there with Moscow, and there's been constant obstacles there. Those seem to be getting slightly better, but speaking today with the leader of the Ukrainian Greek Catholics, the largest Catholic Ukrainian church, Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk, he said to me today that if the Russians are to be serious about collaborating with the Catholic Church, they really need to show divine mercy, peace and reconciliation. And for them, of course, with the ongoing silent conflict, as Cardinal Parolin calls it, in Ukraine, that isn't happening.
Well, it at least sounds like a worthy goal to work towards, and we're going to continue to watch and see if Cardinal Parolin does indeed meet in August, as is reported. Eduard Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Thank you, White.
The Vatican is releasing new details on the Holy Father's upcoming trip to Colombia. The Pope will preside over a reconciliation ceremony between Colombian victims and former guerrillas during his visit in September. This is the first papal visit to Colombia since St. Pope John Paul II in 1986. Coming up, how the federal health care debate is seen through the eyes of the states. The Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin joins us in studio. Today is the solemnity of the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus. It was first celebrated in 1670 in France and represents Jesus' love for all mankind. The feast day takes place 19 days after Pentecost. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Planned Parenthood is hitting national airwaves to attack the Republican health care bill that would defund them. This comes after the abortion provider spent more than $700,000 in its failed bid to get a Democrat in Georgia elected to the House this week. Representative Jody Heiss serves as a different district in the state.
The fact that they would put that much money behind their candidate shows what their interests are. They want people in Congress that's going to continue giving them taxpayer dollars, and they were willing to come to the plate for it, and the people of the 6th District rejected it completely.
The Senate health care bill would strip Planned Parenthood of federal Medicaid money for 1 year. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the abortion provider gets about $450 million in federal funds every year. The pressure to replace Obamacare is on. Some conservatives, including Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, are expressing concerns, saying the Senate bill doesn't repeal Obamacare or lower costs for Americans. Joining us now is Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch of Wisconsin. Rebecca, your colleague, Governor Scott Walker, issued a statement before the bill was released encouraging state Republicans to keep their promises to replace Obamacare. Yet, Senator Ron Johnson, as we just heard, says, he's worried the Republican plan wouldn't actually repeal Obamacare. Do you agree, first off?
Well, I haven't read the United States Senate bill, but I will say this. Ron Johnson campaigned on repealing and replacing Obamacare. Well, my understanding of the senator's position is that he doesn't believe this bill does that. And if that is the case, then he wouldn't be fulfilling his campaign promise, because his eventual goal is to get rid of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act as we know it, because for folks like me, cancer survivors and people with pre-existing conditions, Obamacare is a threat. And what we have seen and heard is not yet the right solution. So I'm eager for the repeal and the replacement of Obamacare, but I think what Senator Johnson is looking for is the same thing Governor Walker is looking for, which is the right bullet to hit the right target, and that is the true repeal and replacement of legislation that would be devastating for people like me who are dealing with pre-existing conditions and also rising healthcare costs.
As the Lieutenant Governor, you're on Governor Walker's task force, if you will, to fight opioid abuse. Back in 2013, more people from Wisconsin died from a drug overdose than even a car accident, suicide, or firearms. What are you doing to stop the opioid crisis?
Well, we're very blessed in Wisconsin that we are regarded as a leader in fighting opioid abuse, but we know there's more that needs to be done. That's why the governor convened this task force on opioid abuse, and he said he wanted me to co-chair it along with a state representative colleague of mine whose daughter is dealing with addiction. It's really important that we stay ahead of the bad guys. And so one of the suggestions that my co-chairman and I made to the governor earlier this year was cracking down on the drug traffickers and adding 4 new positions to do that inside our Department of Justice. But in addition to cracking down on the traffickers, we also know that about 80% of those folks who get addicted start with a prescription. Whether it's their prescription or someone else's, we know that these are opioids that actually came at some point from a doctor writing a prescription for them. And if that's the case, we need to start to change our culture of prescribing. That's why in Wisconsin we've implemented a prescription drug monitoring program. So the prescribers, as well as the pharmacists, have access to a database of folks who have been prescribed these medications so they can detect when someone is pill shopping, when someone is either an addict or someone is looking around in order to pass these on to either the bad guys or someone they might get hooked on drugs. We know that very few people actually start with heroin itself, and so changing our prescribing practices, as this prescription drug monitoring program already has done, year over year there are about 14% fewer prescriptions, and so we know that that is big part of the solution. And
important work. Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch of Wisconsin, thanks so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
The South Lawn of the White House turned into Central Park for one night as the first family hosted members of Congress for a picnic. President Trump took time to pay tribute to House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, who is recovering from a gunshot wound. Cardinal Ivan Diaz, former Archbishop of Mumbai and a longtime Vatican official, has died. Diaz was born in India and was made a cardinal in 2001 by Pope John Paul II. He worked at the Vatican and for the Pontifical Urban University until 2011 when he retired. Cardinal Diaz died Monday in Rome. He was 81 years old.
Up next, a Christian school in Indiana says it's being silenced by the mainstream media. We'll tell you why. And a step towards sainthood for a Wisconsin Capuchin friar.
Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A private school in Indiana teaches its students to live according to Christian values when it comes to sexuality and marriage. Lighthouse Christian Academy in Bloomington now finds itself in the national spotlight. The school says it has the right to deny admission to students who embrace a gay lifestyle because that goes against Christian teaching. Joining us now is Leslie Heiner, Vice President of Programs for EdChoice, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing education, freedom, and choice. So Leslie, Lighthouse Christian Academy in Indiana receives $665,000 in state funds to enroll 152 students this year. Does the school have the right to choose the students who meet their admissions based on Christian values?
Wyatt, the first most important answer to your question is that funding in the form of vouchers actually goes to parents. It is parents that then decide which school and which type of school is the best fit for their child to attend. So I think it's very important in this discussion to understand that the state is not funding any particular school. The state is funding the education of children, and the parents make the decision what's best for their own children. And this is what's happening also at Lighthouse Academy.
So essentially then, Lighthouse Academy, as its own independent school, can make the decisions in terms of admission.
Absolutely, yes. And that's really the beauty of choice, that there should be multiple choices of education for parents to be able to choose for their children, and especially education that fits with the family's values, where a child will attend the school and fit in. When a child's comfortable and fits in, then that's when children begin to learn.
We reached out to Lighthouse Christian School, and there's part of what they said. They had a quote for us. It said, "Big media is once again leveraging the power of civil government to shame and silence Christians in the crosshairs. Commitments to sexual morality confessed by the Christian Church for 2,000 years and taught by Christian schools like Lighthouse Christian Academy." So then don't Christian schools have the right to teach Christian doctrine, even though there's sort of this perceived, as some people would say, separation of church and state in terms of tax dollars?
The schools are, again, the parents' choice and not the state's choice. And that's very significant to the answer to your question. And so, yes, absolutely. It's important, in fact, for those schools to stay true to their mission. Now, there's some people that may not like any particular school's mission. Well, that's fine. You may not like it, but it doesn't mean that it's illegal or it shouldn't happen in some way. And in this case, the school is staying true to its mission, and that's okay.
The Trump administration is looking at taxpayer-funded vouchers as a way to expand school choice nationwide. In your opinion, do you think that that's a good thing, that will help all sorts of different Christian schools?
The President and Secretary Diaz have been very supportive of school choice generally. And I know that they're looking at ways that they could be helpful, but Secretary Diaz has been very clear that she's not looking to establish a giant new federal program, but rather they're looking for a way to help those at the state and local level to be able to have more choice. They've also been very clear that there will be nothing that harms religious liberty in any way.
Leslie Heiner, Vice President of Programs for EdChoice. Thanks so much for explaining that to us.
Thank you.
The rise of assisted suicide has put a spotlight on the need to protect the medically vulnerable. This week on EWTN ProLife Weekly, Catherine Zeltner talks to the brother of Terry Schiavo, a Florida woman who became a face of the pro-life movement.
Terry's situation was never an end-of-life type of case. It only became end-of-life when they took away her food and water through a feeding tube, which was the only thing sustaining her.
To see more of Catherine's interview, tune in to ProLife Weekly tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. It will re-air on Sunday at 10 a.m. A date has been set for the Beatification Mass of Father Solanus Casey. The priest, who worked in Detroit for many years, will be made blessed on November 18th at the stadium where the Lions play football in downtown Detroit. Pope Francis approved a miracle attributed to Solanus last month. The Capuchin friar is known for his healing powers. He died in 1957. Finally tonight, this week, a priest in Ukraine becomes the youngest Catholic bishop in the world. Eduard Penton was ordained an auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of Lviv, Ukraine, on Wednesday. According to Religious Information Service of Ukraine, his installation mass was conducted in Polish, Ukrainian, and Latin. In his first speech as bishop, he thanked God for the gift of faith and service. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter for even more content. Good night, and God bless.